I'm Collin, and this is one way to make a frittata. Tamar Adler begins her book An Everlasting Meal with the practical suggestion that if you're unsure what to make for a meal, you can usually start by putting a pot of water on the stove. And while it gets ready to boil, you can search for things to put in it. Even when I do have a plan, I like to begin by starting a pot of water. It clears my head, and like Tamar says, by the time the water is ready, you usually will have something to add to the pot. One thing I love about frittatas is that you can fill them with pretty much whatever you have on hand. For me, it's one of my favorite ways to feed my family bunches of greens. So today, we're going to make it all about chard. 2 whole bunches of chard, leaves peeled from the woody stems, blanched and squeezed. To de-stem chard, grasp the stalk in one hand. With the other, pinch and tug towards the top of the leaf with a fearless rip. Place the leaves in a large bowl and set aside the stalks for another meal. They can be diced and sautéed with onions and fit seamlessly into hashes or stew. Place your bowl of chard leaves under cold running water. Let the water fill the bowl to the brim, agitating the leaves with your hand as they bathe. Your goal is to shake any dirt from the leaves and allow it to settle to the bottom of the bowl. Meanwhile, your pot of water will have come to a boil. This step calls for my number 1 kitchen essential, a bowl of kosher salt. Get your fingers in there. Salting by feel trains your muscle memory and taps into latent culinary instincts. We're going to salt the water generously. If you haven't done this before, it might seem like a ton of salt, but keep in mind we're salting our food indirectly through the medium of the water. You can go ahead and taste the water, which is a great way to learn how much salt you should be adding. Remind you of the ocean? Perfect. Our chard will come out pleasantly seasoned. Lift the chard leaves out of their bowl and into the pot. Press them down into the water with your utensil of choice. They don't take long to cook, just 2 or 3 minutes. Tear off a bit of chard and taste for tenderness. Raw leaf? Not done. Slime? Overcooked. Remove the chard from the pot and spread it out on a baking sheet to cool. This salty water is still totally usable if you want to keep cooking with it. Boil potatoes or pasta and get the most out of the energy you put into the water. Once the chard is cooled to the point where you can comfortably hold it in your bare hands, we're going to squeeze out the moisture. You want to practice a bit of restraint here, as it's possible to over-squeeze and lose out on flavor, but basically you want your greens to feel like a wrung-out towel. If you're trying to eat more greens throughout the week, these little balls hold up really well in your fridge, and are excellent fried up with olive oil and garlic. The same technique we used with the chard works just as well with kale, spinach, collards, or any other leafy green, though the cooking times do vary, so keep everything separate and boil in batches. For our frittata, we want the chard in bite-sized bits, so run your knife through the balls and set it all aside. Now it's time to build the rest of the frittata base. You'll always start with eggs. Portion size is variable here. I want to get 1 solid meal out of this for Angie and me, so I'm using 6 large eggs. Season with salt and pepper. Dried herbs are good here, oregano and basil. I'll add nutmeg too, since it's delicious with greens for some reason. Beyond that, what you add here is super flexible. I have cream in the fridge, so that goes in, and some sour cream. Ricotta would be a classic choice here, but not necessary. I'll add grated Parmesan because that's always a good choice. Also, we fried off some bacon yesterday, which is kind of rare in our household, but shoot, when I asked Angie if she wanted bacon in the frittata, her eyes lit up, so we're putting it in. Add the chard, mix everything up vigorously until it's a homogenized batter, and that's that. Place an oven-capable skillet over medium-high heat on the stove. Once it's hot, add a pleasant gurgle of olive oil and swirl it all round. You really do want your skillet to be hot before you add the batter to reduce the likelihood of stickage. Transfer the skillet to a 350 oven and bake for 28 to 35 minutes until the frittata has poofed up and feels firm in the center when pressed. Allow a few minutes to cool so that the sides of the frittata pull back from the walls of the skillet, then loosen the edges with a butter knife or spatula. Then, flip from the skillet onto a plate. A fail-proof method here involves oven-safe gloves, though you can accomplish a more acrobatic flip with nothing more than fearlessness and a can-do attitude. The bottom of the frittata is usually the less attractive side, so if you're feeling precious about it, flip once more onto a fresh plate, and we've got a frittata. Traditionally, this dish would be cooled to room temperature and eaten for lunch, which is a perfectly fine way to enjoy it. But in my experience, it's delicious hot out of the oven too, which sometimes is just what you need it to be. This frittata is rich and tender, Maybe a little on the salty side since I added impromptu bacon after salting the eggs, but it's totally delicious and pairs well with some pickles, a simple bright salad, and some cold, dry wine. Once you get familiar with the frittata template, it's a quick dish to throw together, works well with whatever you have on hand, and the baking time gives you a chance to clean up before you eat. I would love to hear how your frittata adventures go. Until then, happy eating and see you next time.